Hello and welcome to Restore 2022. We have this great privilege to be reading together God's written word to us. And as we do that, we grow in our knowledge of Him and it helps us to live for Him. We've arrived in Luke chapter 17, where Luke is informing the readers about the instructions that Jesus has for His disciples and their particular believing community. To obey Jesus and His teaching is to take the message and to receive the transformation of His kingdom. Things that cause others to stumble, especially by ignoring and rejecting God, must be watched out for, must be looked out for. Sins must be confronted, must be confessed, forgiven. Praise and gratitude are principles that are marks of being a follower of Jesus, who has experienced the setting free of Christ's power and His kingdom. Serving the King is natural and doesn't come under any obligation of God rewarding us. And then the chapter ends with the tension of here and now and there and then of this coming of this kingdom that is marked actually now with patience and waiting steadfastly for His return. But also we come to a weird and strange, unpopular parable of the unworthy servant. I've never heard anybody preach on this. I've never preached on this myself. And Jesus tells this parable to His disciples that actually He's warning His disciples Jesus told this parable to teach His disciples that warning sinning disciples and forgiving those who sinned and repented was part of what it means to be a disciple. It was not Jesus told this parable to His disciples because He wanted to teach them that by them warning sinning disciples and forgiving them who repented was their duty. It was not something that they should expect a reward from God. The Pharisees believed that because of their pious deeds and their behavior, God was a debtor to them. God will indeed reward faithful service. We see that in Luke chapter 12. However, this is not because He is in debt to His servants, but because He graciously gives them more than what is just. As I mentioned earlier on, in chapter 12, Jesus' teaching deals with the Master's grace, whereas here in chapter 17, once again, it highlights the importance of the servant's attitude. And perhaps Jesus selects this example of a servant laboring in the fields or tending sheep because actually this kind of services the disciples are used to. And Jesus pictured this one servant that had different responsibilities to his master. He's not talking here about the large estate with slaves or servants with designated tasks, but it resonates with the realistic duties of the disciples. One of the commentators talks about that actually this is not to demonstrate the master's attitude to express thanks, but the servant's attitude to do their duty without placing the master under any obligation to him. And again, Jesus draws this application because the disciples should do the same, should have the same attitude as this servant by claiming to be unworthy. They're not saying that they are totally worthless people, but they mean that they are unworthy of any reward because of all the service. Because this is part of serving the master. And again, if you want to be more particular here, the duty is forgiving generously, verses 3 and 4. But the teaching of Jesus applies generally to all the duties that the disciples are serving God. Jesus and the apostles taught elsewhere that the prospect of the reward should motivate the disciples to serve the Lord. Matthew 6, Paul says it in 1 Corinthians 3, 9, 2 Corinthians 5. There are other places, but Jesus is not contradicting that here. Here the point was that God is under no obligation to reward us. He'll do so because that's his choice, not because he has to do it. And our attitude should be that God does not need us to serve him, and that serving him is only our heart of service towards him, and he is under no obligation to reward us.